So as Brandon mentioned, we're going to be talking a lot about the dangers of democracy. But Corey, Mike, Stephanie, I think before we jump into the dangers, we need to first define a little bit what a healthy democracy looks like, so we can then talk about some of the ways that that's maybe been threatened or come under attack. So I'd like to start there. If each of you could just talk a little bit about some of the things that you think healthy democracy, or what comes to mind when you think about what a strong democracy looks like.
I'll break the ice. I got here first, so I was a little warmed up. The first thing that comes to mind is the First Amendment, one of the best, greatest sentences ever written in the English language. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
I think I agree with Corey, and after that, I think the concept of due process of law, that nobody's above the law and that everybody gets their process without just being thrown into jail without any charges.
I'd add in free and fair elections.
Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that, Mike, just for our fellows' benefit?
Sure, just essentially elections in which there aren't any significant barriers to voting for various groups, and that the votes are all counted, well, fairly. And certainly there's a lot of dispute about that these days on both sides.
I'm concerned about a ton of things, y'all, and they're broadly the things that bring us together, I think, are disappearing. The things that drive us apart are basically accelerating like crazy, and that's digitally and in person. But at the end of the day, I think that we have this really unique form of government, of first in the history of humanity, and it requires participation to function properly. And it sucks to participate in it because it's a gross system that is corrupt, that has outsized influence of money, that is super partisan, and that young people are increasingly just tuning out of. And that is to the detriment of those young people's voices, and is to the detriment of this entire experiment in democracy. So I feel like, for me, my big charge is, how do you get people to care about helping a system that is so damaged, and trying to make it better when it is not serving them in the way that they want to be served? So how can we get people to care about something that doesn't care about them? And I think that's a super challenge. But obviously you do care, or you wouldn't be doing this whole podcast fellowship. So good on you. So then what can we do to supercharge you, help you out, make sure that you can be those change makers that you dream about being? So that's why I'm even here today.
And I want to come back to each of you and ask you to say a little bit more about the strength that you identified, the ways that you see that aspect of democracy being threatened, either right now or historically, or both. So Corey, we'll loop back around to you, and you could say more about dangers around the First Amendment.
If we look at just the freedoms that are articulated in the First Amendment, I think that there are, well, we are seeing concrete attacks on just about every freedom that's articulated there. So just off the top of my head, let's see. Sorry, I'm pulling it up now so I can have a frame of reference. Respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, abridging freedom of speech. I mean, or of the press. I was just reading a story today that was of a reporter that's been in a Pentagon reporter that's been based there for 25 years. And now, because they don't want to sign on to essentially be a propaganda arm of the Department of Defense, that they're no longer given access. So that's a definitely a breach of those freedoms. This is, collectively we're spending trillions of dollars for what goes on in that building, and It's for our benefit, for the men and women who serve in the military's benefit, for all of our benefit to have access, appropriate access, professional access. This is just something that's for all of our benefit, including Congress. When we're looking at the balance of power, the right of the people peaceably to assemble. I've heard one elected official after another refer to planned peaceful get-togethers coming up this weekend as we record this as the I Hate America rallies. That it's they're creating propaganda to make it out as if anybody who wants to get together peaceably to assemble are part of Antifa and are clearly paid agitators and such kind of language. Now, this isn't yet a direct a direct breach of our freedoms, but this kind of language is meant to undermine it and to snuff out some folks' desire to even participate. That's just today. The right to petition the government for a redress of grievances, the attacks on law firms and taking away law firms' access to federal buildings. These are direct attacks to the very pillars of our constitutional republic.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I hope that it's coming across just how passionate all of our hosts are about the work that they do, the topics they cover. And I hope that in addition to some of the knowledge that they're sharing, a little bit of that passion and enthusiasm rubs off on the students here today as well. The order corrector, Stephanie, we went to you next. Tell us more about threats to due process.
Well, first of all, I think that the overall question is, I think we're past your question. The question more for me is what is going well in our democracy, because I think that list is a lot shorter. But in terms of due process, the Fifth Amendment says no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And, the most obvious of those right now is kidnapping people off of the streets and throwing them in we don't know where, taking them to we don't know where, we don't even know if they're alive, not having any sort of warrant to do this, being masked, not having uniforms, all the things that we see happening on our streets.
What you said about the list of things working well in democracy, but let's wrap up with Mike and Kami. So Mike, tell us more about threats to free and fair elections.
Just one quick thing before that. On the Constitution stuff, I just want to say that I think what's really dangerous is that a lot of the things we see going on are right up to the line of constitutionally okay. And so what's dangerous that we start framing this in terms of this is constitutional, this isn't. I think a much more important question is what is conducive to a healthy democracy. So that gets away from that issue of, well, is it constitutionally okay for the president to send troops to Portland and Chicago and LA and DC and that sort of thing. And I think we can sometimes be playing on sort of the wrong field. We need to focus on what really works and doesn't work for democracy. But as for free and fair elections, obviously on the right, there were all kinds of concerns about that because of all the COVID-related changes that were put into place at the last minute in 2020. And of course, we are on the left, and I'm certainly a person of the left, concerned with access to the ballot box for various people. And so both sides have different views. But I do want to just add one more thing onto my answer. Probably the most important thing is, I would say, executive overreach. On the right, they were talking about it as early as, well, Obama on, Obama, they've been to Biden, and then under Trump 2.0, they decided, I guess, hold my beer, I'll show you executive overreach. And now we're getting all sorts of it. And when you have a party in Congress that is actually just working like an extension of the presidency, people on, they're just afraid or just too, I don't know, afraid, whatever, to go against the great leader, that's when you get into real problems. And we're just hoping against hope, maybe in some instances, that the courts will somehow save us from that. That's the big red flashing danger signs, I would think.
I don't disagree with anything anyone said so far, but I will say this. The problems that I'm worried about, the problems of youth disengagement, the problem of a corrupt political system where money corrupts, the problem of people not connecting across their differences, the problem of having a low outcome legislative process where we have fewer and fewer bills being passed on increasingly partisan lines. All those things preceded Trump. They've been decades long things. The erosion of bipartisan precedents in Congress has eroded over about 40-year period. I think Trump is definitely gasoline on a fire that's been around. But I'm thinking Trump's popularity is his approval ratings are over 50% in about half our states right now, about 24 states as of this morning in Morning Consul's report. It means he's more popular in those states than he isn't. And here I am in my liberal bubble of Los Angeles, where here he's very unpopular. But if I go back to my home state of Louisiana, there will be lots of Trump flags flying very high over there. So all that's to say, like when we think about these policies and the things that really bother us about politics today, I want to be very careful about not vilifying our neighbors, not vilifying our siblings and our parents and our colleagues and our coworkers. Like they are ascribing to their beliefs for reasons. And those reasons you can argue with, you can say their foundations are bad, that their logic is flawed, like the arguments are terrible. But I refuse to say that they're bad people and that I hate them and that they're my enemy, because they're not. And as much as I'm not a fan of the president, I think there's a lot of things he's doing that I'm applauding. Yeah, he stopped the conflict in Gaza for, I don't know how long it's going to be, but he did it. Give him some credit. You know what? Operation Warp Speed for stopping COVID, that was a spectacular success and an incredible marshaling of resources. So, give the guy some credit. And yes, he's doing so many things that I find horrifying. But my bottom line point is I do not want to contribute to further division by hating on this president for reasons that preceded him. And I want to go back to root causes and say I'm not mad at the person, I am, but I'm more mad at the symptoms and the problems that created that person.
I would say that playing off of that, I think what we've really lost is an ability to talk about our differences in terms of policy as opposed to making them very personal. And now it's very difficult to talk about people who see the world differently than we do and not have a lot of people ascribe to them ignorance or evil intent or that sort of thing on both sides. And we just don't have nearly as many spaces for those sort of conversations as we used to have. And when we meet people, we meet them in an online type of social media setting where it's easy to be anonymous and flame people, where you never do some of this stuff if you were actually meeting them, even in a Zoom call, but especially face to face. And to me, that's the sort of tech danger where we do most of our political interactions in that sort of a way that makes it so easy to just make caricatures out of our opponents and make them into these hateful, evil things that are subhuman in some way. And both sides do it. I think that's a bigger danger than almost anything else.
I think that's kind of leaving out one of the most important things right now, which is we don't share reality. We live in completely separate realities. There is no source of information that everybody listens to. So finding places to come together is really hard when you don't see the same world. And so I think that is a really important piece. But also that the stuff that goes on online, I mean, so many people, many more people are checked out right now that are online in the political discourse um because it's hard, it's horrifying. So so I just wanted to talk about the fact that we don't have a shared reality.
I want to come back to our fellows and ask each of you about your reactions to some of what you heard. I'm curious that the threats that you heard Corey and Kami and Michael and Stephanie talk about, free speech, peaceful protest, what we're seeing with regard to immigration, free and fair elections, people being disengaged, lack of shared reality, few opportunities to come together. Like, how is all of that landing with you, and what of those things do you find most salient or most relevant in your life and as you have conversations with your friends and your family? So Alina, we'll start with you. I saw you nodding along at several points during the discussion.
Yeah, definitely like panic mode, I think. I'm like, oh, I feel my heart racing. I feel like palms sweaty, knees weak, arms forget whatever that is. Um, like I feel that. And I think I'm curious, like, I don't know if this is a false like association, but do you think like the personalizing like politics and like all of that like stuff, like, you think because America is built on, like, individualism versus, like, less of collectivism, as in, like, I think comparing it to, like, a lot of other countries, like, I don't know, my family's Pakistani, so I, think of Pakistan as a very more collective-ish nation, so it's like, how do you think America is, like, "I'm solo, I'm independent, I'm individual," like, do you think that plays into that? I don't know if that's, like, a false
Yeah.
association, though.
I'll take a stab at that. I think it's a great set of categories to think through, Alina. So I would lean into the individualism in order to get to at least bits of collectivism. And what I mean by that is a lot of folks will tune out and go to the ultimate individualism and just maybe come in contact with the outside world via, chatting on a game that they're playing or on social media or something like that. Um, but because we get so hopeless when we think about just all the things that we've discussed, what we are concerned about, right? But when I'm talking about leaning into individualism, maybe I'm not taking exactly what you're referring to, but what I mean is individual connections, right? So kind of to Kami's point, I am I hope that what I said initially didn't give you the impression that I think in terms of all those people, because the truth is, in 2016, there's at least a dozen of the Republican candidates in the primary that I could have easily voted for. So I definitely, in other times, I'd be considered pretty right of center on a lot of issues and could have supported a lot of right of center candidates like Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, and even in 2012. So I don't want to give the wrong impression here, but when I'm talking about leaning into individualism to get at least small bits of collectivism, if I can see a human being, David Brooks's 2023 book, How to Know a Person, was a really great, it was a great offering to address some of the symptoms of our time. And he was building on some great work. A woman named, a great writer, great journalist named Moni Guzman, who wrote a book called I Never Thought of It That Way. If you read one book over the next month or even over the next year, read Moni's book, I Never Thought of It That Way, because I want to be able to see a human being. I don't want to look at somebody and say, oh, he voted for Trump. Oh, she has a MAGA hat. I don't want to see that. I want to see a human being. And the other thing is to set expectations. If I sit down with somebody who thinks very differently than me on one individual politician, Donald Trump in this case, it doesn't necessarily, we have long ballots. It doesn't necessarily, even if we're just talking about election stuff, political stuff, we have long ballots. And I'll bet we could look at our long ballots and there's any number of things that we voted similarly on, even if we voted differently on that one line at the top of our ballot, right? But then go beyond that. And what is your story? Where do you come from? I want to better understand you. Who influenced you? Tell me more about you. even if they say something that I can't believe they're saying that. Somebody, for example, I don't know if this was brought up here or I was just writing about it. Somebody talking about the Fedsurrection, and it just blew my mind. Like, you do remember that Donald Trump was still president on January 6th, right? It wasn't Biden's FBI. So how can you think that? But I had to get past that so I could see the human being that was exasperated about something.
Yeah.
Well, what is it that bothers you about that? So that there's probably not a lot that we can agree on, at least today, when it comes to what happened on January 6th, but maybe there is one degree of connection. So lean into the individual so I can see the individual so that we can get to at least a little small taste of collective. I can connect with this person. That's the beginning of collectivism. I think you're onto something, Alina. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Corey. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep things moving here, get to the rest of the fellows. Annalise, what about you? What jumps out at you from this discussion?
What's really interesting to me is kind of this contrast that we're seeing with people that are very disengaged from politics, which I think is a problem in and of itself, but also like there's too much polarization. And I just think it's interesting that both of those things are happening at the same time. I know just this morning I was reading an article from Brown and it was saying that the US has like polarization is increasing at a faster rate than any other democracy in the world. But at the same time, among my peers, I see that a lot of people are apolitical and not in the sense that they are particularly like more understanding or just less passionate about it, but rather they just kind of disengage themselves because I know someone mentioned like the feeling of hopelessness. And I think that when you feel like you are just out of control, especially when you're younger and you can't vote or you like just feel more distanced from these like older and more powerful politicians, it's really easy to like feel like you're disengaged from the conversation. So it really resonates with me when you guys are all talking about the need to actually like understand the people behind their political decisions, right? Because it's so easy for people to either go full like completely polarized, very divisive, very anti the other side, but at the same time, like use that to just kind of disengage. And so I think even though both those problems are just kind of on opposite spectrums, I think the source of the problem is kind of the same thing. And so yeah, just to reiterate, I really think that it is important we have those thoughtful conversations to solve both like disengagement, especially among younger people, but also the division that we're seeing in the country.
Yeah, and that sounds like a perfect topic for your podcast to maybe try. That's a big topic, or it seems like a big topic to try to get at. But hopefully, by the end of the fellowship, we'll help you narrow it down and come up with something that's manageable to tackle. Let's see, Shay, what about you?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just if I had to pick somebody who I resonated with the most, I would say it was Kami and what he had to say about uh, what I would take to be a long historical arc and trajectory that we're living through in the United States, and that Donald Trump is really only, we might say, the crowning jewel of, or the crowning caca of, I don't know. But either way, that there's a large set of problematics that have not been publicly taken into account historically, some of which include wage stagnation. And if they have, they just fit into these like neat and tidy categories, as if wage stagnation were separate from the problem of money in politics. I think all that's wrong. These are all to be taken together and have clearly kind of like all crystallized in the person of Donald Trump in one way. And so it's reducible to him. But like that, to me, is a major problem. People, not only do we not know how to talk to each other across partisan lines, like we don't have a common historical understanding of what the hell the United States has been for the past 50 years, right? I could dredge up for you all of the evils we've undertaken from, Reagan and the Iran-Contra affair to unnecessary invasions in Iran, and that would all be one very left-wing story. I could tell you a right-wing story about then, the opening up of free enterprise under Reagan and Clinton. And these stories will not talk to each other. And it's not clear how we can make them talk to each other. We have no coherent habit of mind to think through what this country even has been for the past 50 years. So that's one way of just getting at the issue. That's not even to say it. Speak to any of the material problems, which are like wage stagnation and money in politics. But so I just wanted to speak to another side
Yeah.
that's related to those. So that for me is a major issue.
As a historian, I want to point out that 50-year not having a common understanding of our history is really, we don't have a common understanding of our history at all. From the beginning, recently or not recently, we don't have a common understanding of what the United States is, what it should be, who it should be for, who's us, who's them, who's got a right to exist, who doesn't, all those things. There is no common understanding on that. So I think you put your finger on something big, but I would say it's even perhaps bigger than that.
Yet again, sounds like something interesting. You certainly bring a lot of historical perspective, Shay, and so I'm looking forward to hearing that come out in whatever way is most appropriate. And sounds like you'll have a lot of good expertise to work with as well. Tenzin, how about you?
I feel like I really resonated with Corey or Mr. Nathan a lot. Like you shouldn't judge someone by like their political affiliation, but like currently, like right now, like there's narratives like being pushed out to get like each party to hate one another. And like currently with the New York City mayoral election, like the word socialist just like scares like a bunch of people, and they don't really care about what like the policies like being proposed or stuff like that.
Mhm. That's great. Do you live in New York?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's would love to hear your thoughts on the election. And we're running short on time tonight, but we can come back to that in a future discussion. Joseph, wrap us up here. What resonated with you?
Sure. Well, some of the main themes that stuck out to me in this conversation, if we're talking about sort of the fragility of democratic institutions, also pardon any of the background noise I had in the beginning. But and Shay and I have talked about this a lot, and this is one of the main themes that draws us together to want to work on this, is that there are a couple premises, I think, that create a faulty situation with which one might understand democracy. For example, I think a lot of people might be tempted to universalize democracy around its strict mechanical processes and say that, well, democracy is functioning properly whenever people are voting, or whenever people are, whenever the strict mechanisms of democratic like constitutions are being honored and things, stuff like that. But I think what we're seeing now is a very clear revelation of the fact that these mechanical devices, these democratic or these political tools, whether they be amendments or constitution or things like due process, can and will be used as cudgels, opportunistic cudgels, by certain interested parties if they feel it's worth doing. And so, if they feel that it's worth doing, then what this points us to is that the idea that these mechanical devices that democracy claims to use to protect the broad public's interest are only viable if there's a common faith in the impartiality of the process and a sort of resistance to grab the gun laying on the table, which is to say, I have a judge in a particular circuit who's going to injunct whatever you just did. Because in this case now, what's being done is sort of this the gun on the table is being picked up and used. And so it's a precarious situation that I think, unfortunately, at a lot of times can present itself as a dynamically unstable condition, meaning that once it starts getting unstable, you start getting in this. I mean, hell, what were conservatives talking more broadly about in the last 10 years, other than protecting free speech? And now, the hand is on the shoe is on the other foot, and no one should be surprised, I think, that what's happening is happening. So, other than that, major themes that tend to come up, as far as I know that Shay and I have talked a lot about understanding democracy as something as a technology of communication. And so if you're looking at how democratic discussions and democratic processes are happening, you need to look at how communication is happening, which taps into the exact conversation we were having earlier about total different realities, which I think is absolutely something that needs to get talked on over and over and over. Because, I mean, if you look at the purported cases in which democracy was working on all cylinders, like in the Lincoln Douglas era or something like that. I mean, Reconstruction was very complex. Point being, the populace was widely literary and majorly informed and was participating in debates all the time throughout throughout the Lincoln Douglas debate era. And this is something that Postman refers to in Amusing Ourselves to Death, which is book that Jay and I both, it's a phenomenal book. But the point is that they were all participating in the same discussion, informed, equally informed, and sort of assented to the same sort of political, moral, theological space that they all sort of bought into. And right now, in a literal sense, I mean, algorithms are literally creating infinitely dividing tiny little pocket universes for people to exist in that are completely airtight. So that is not good for the viability of democratic institutions. Those are just all the thoughts that come from my notes. So, thanks.
Those are really good points. I would just caution you to think about when you're in the, say, Lincoln Douglas era, everybody having the same information, that there is a vast population of enslaved people who are also people who are not in the same political milieu as the white.
Of course.
population.
Yeah. Sorry. This needs to be stressed. I guess when I was thinking of this, I was thinking of Postman's book, in which he uses, Postman's really more focused on the media study element, in which it's going from print to TV to radio. And so in referring to Postman's book, and this is a critique that people make of his book as well, what he's trying to champion, or what he's trying to put forward, is that print media itself, it creates a more centralized means of communication. Now, of course, outside of that claim is obvious, undeniable reality that at that point, literacy was not universal, nor was enfranchisement. So it for sure has to be acknowledged.
Joseph and Shay, if you have not already checked out Stephanie's work on freedom over fascism, I think you will find a lot of what she's talking about beneficial, and could learn from everything that she's doing. And Brandon will make sure that everyone has links to everyone's shows who we've heard from today, but I know we're at time, so we're gonna wrap it up there. But I'm excited to hear what you all do, and I hope our panelists too. And panelists, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and I'll turn it back over to Brandon to wrap up the rest of our meeting.
Thank you, Jonah, and thank you to our panelists. I really appreciate you guys coming in and sharing everything with the fellows.